She crawled out of the wreckage, whispering only my name. The wreckage looked like the skeleton of some colossal beast splayed across the jagged ridge of the moon's dead crust. Smoke spiraled lazily into the low gravity, and chunks of melted hull metal hissed as they cooled against the silicate dust. Eli stood motionless for a breath that never quite reached his lungs. His boots crackled softly on the gravel-like terrain as he stepped closer, pulse pounding not from the heat of the crash site, but from something stranger, something unseen but pulling. The distress signal had gone silent 2 hours ago. The cargo freighter registered en route, then gone dark. No crew manifests available, no registered names, no cargo logs. Just a blank anomaly from deep in the Orvion sector and the whisper of an emergency ping that dragged him out here. Yet as he scanned the wreck, there was no fire, no cries for help, no movement, until something did move. A shape, small, crawling. His breath caught in his throat as the form emerged from beneath a split hull plate, dragging itself forward, trembling, but not broken. She came out on hands and knees, slow like something freshly born or long forgotten. Pale skin dusted with ash, hair like frozen light cascading down her back, and those ears long, furred, twitching like a startled fox. She collapsed into the dust, then lifted her head, and her lips moved. Only one word came out, one name. Eli. He flinched, heart hammering. She said it like a memory, like it was carved into her bones, but he had never seen her before. Not in this galaxy, not in any of the systems he'd charted or missions he'd flown. She had no ID tag, no uniform, no implant. Just bare skin barely covered by torn furs that looked stitched together from creatures not registered in any Xeno database. But her voice was soft thunder, like it had echoed across 100 lifetimes to find him. She tried to speak again, lips parting, but her body gave out. He dropped to his knees beside her, instinct overtaking confusion. His fingers brushed her cheek. It was warm, too warm. Oxygen deprivation, maybe. He tapped his communicator, pinged medical, signaled evac, but his eyes never left her face. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, silver irises glowing faintly, unnaturally. She tried again. Her fingers found his wrist and clutched with more strength than expected. "Don't leave," she whispered, though her lips barely moved. "They'll find me." "Who?" he asked, but she was already unconscious. The evac came fast. He didn't let the medics load her onto a drone stretcher. He carried her himself, protective in a way that made no sense to him. Something about her presence, felt impossible to look away from. Not just her alien beauty, not just the uncanny way she'd said his name like it meant survival, but the deep-rooted hum inside him that said, "You've been waiting for her your whole life. You just didn't know it." She woke 12 hours later in a sterile bed aboard the Arcadia, his patrol ship. He was there when her eyes opened, sitting quietly in the med bay with a data pad he wasn't reading. When she sat up, her arms crossed over her chest out of instinct, the sheet sliding down to her waist. But she didn't seem embarrassed. She seemed unsure, like gravity was new, like her own body wasn't entirely hers. "I know you," she said, not as a question. "I don't think we've met," he replied gently. She frowned. "But I said your name. I saw your face before. In dreams." His throat dried. "Do you remember anything else? Where you're from?" No, just your name. And cold. So much cold. And then fire." He nodded slowly, his heart in disarray. "You were on a freight vessel. It crashed. No other survivors." She looked down at her hands like they didn't belong to her. "That's not a name I know. I don't remember ever being there." "Do you know your name?" She blinked. "They called me Lyra." The way she said it, it didn't sound like something she chose. More like something assigned. Something worn like a collar. "Who's they?" Her lip quivered. "I don't know, but I wasn't theirs. I know that much." There was a pause, and then she did something he didn't expect. She reached out, fingertips barely grazing his, and in that touch a wave of something passed between them, like the sound of bells underwater, like memory. His breath caught. "What was that?" "I don't know," she said, voice trembling. "But it's always been there. Like part of me is waiting for you." Like you're the reason I escaped. That word again. Escaped. Were you being held captive? She closed her eyes. I think I was grown. He stared at her, stunned into silence. Not born, she whispered. Made, bred, like cargo, like an experiment. But I ran. Or maybe they let me run. I don't remember the why. I just remember fire. And then I was falling. And I whispered your name. Outside the viewport, the stars blinked indifferent. But in the medbay, the space between them hummed with a new gravity. He cleared his throat. Lyra, I think we need to run some deeper scans. Genetic ones. We need to understand what they did to you. She didn't protest. She just nodded slowly. But as she leaned back into the bed, her gaze never left him. And later that night, when he reviewed the scan data, the chill ran deeper than he thought possible. Her DNA was not just spliced. It was rewritten. Portions human, portions alien, species unknown. And something else, coded, nested deep inside her neural net. A message, a pattern. It pulsed only when he entered the room. And it said one thing, Eli. He couldn't sleep, not after what the scan revealed, not after the name, his name, echoed back at him from deep within her altered mind like a signal programmed into the dark. The silence of the ship, usually a comfort in deep patrol runs, now felt heavy and thick, like it was listening, watching, waiting for something to happen between them. Eli stared at the readouts glowing on his console, but all he saw was her face, Lyra, the way she looked at him, like she knew him better than he knew himself, like her soul had already mapped his before her body ever did. He kept hearing her voice, soft and electric, whispering his name from the wreckage as if it were the only thing she'd ever been certain of. Her presence lingered in the ship like a scent, like a heat source, impossible to ignore. Eventually he stood and made his way to the medbay, footsteps hushed against the corridors. The lights were dimmed automatically, casting everything in soft amber glow. The medical sensors buzzed low, rhythmic, almost intimate, like a breath exhaled in sleep. She was there, resting in the diagnostic cradle, one leg drawn up loosely under the blanket, one arm thrown carelessly across her stomach. Her pale hair fanned out behind her, shimmering faintly even in low light. Her fox-like ears twitching occasionally in her sleep. Her skin looked almost too soft, too flawless, like it had been engineered with care, yet bore small bruises at the edges of her wrists, the kind restraint cuffs would leave. He stood there for a long moment, unsure if he should speak or leave, until her eyes opened without warning and locked onto him. No fear, no startle, just slow awareness. You came, she murmured, her voice lower than before, almost velvety. I didn't dream it. You didn't, he said, surprised by the rasp in his own voice. Are you in pain? No, she said, but her fingers curled into the blanket as though resisting something. But there's something. What? Inside, like a heat, a pull. It started the moment you touched me. It hasn't stopped. His chest tightened. He could hear the hum of the ship, the steady rhythm of her vitals. But beneath that, there was a soundless pressure building in the air between them. Do you want me to leave? He asked, barely trusting his own question. Her answer came not in words, but in how the blanket slid just slightly down her body, bearing one shoulder, then the curve of her breast, the fabric catching like it had a mind of its own. Her skin glowed faintly with that strange inner light, and her gaze never left his. No, she said, softer now. You make the heat quieter. His body tensed, not from fear, but something more primal. He stepped closer, and she sat up slowly, the blanket falling around her waist. She didn't try to hide herself. If anything, her posture invited him to see her, to acknowledge her as she was. Not fully human, not entirely alien, but something other, something that stirred every instinct in him. There's something between us, she said, reaching up to touch his chest, her fingers warm through the fabric. I don't know what it is, but I need to know if it's real. His breath hitched. It's real, he said, because lying felt impossible in front of her. She nodded once, then leaned forward, her lips ghosting over his neck. Not quite kissing, just breathing him in. Then help me, she whispered. Make it stop. She didn't mean pain. She meant the ache, the pressure building inside her since the wreck. He didn't know if it was genetic, engineered, or emotional. He didn't care. In that moment, all he knew was that he was the only anchor she had in this strange return to life, and she was quickly becoming his gravity too. He pulled her gently into his arms, and she melted into him like she belonged there, her fingers curling into his hair as her breath trembled against his ear. Every touch between them sparked something hotter than logic. Every glance lingered too long. Every heartbeat drummed in unison. She tilted her head, her silver eyes burning softly, and kissed him. Slow, searching, like she was tasting a memory she never had. He responded before thought could stop him, his hands sliding over the bare skin of her back, the curve of her spine too warm, too alive. Their bodies fit like puzzle pieces designed in another world. She made a soft sound into his mouth, half whimper, half purr, and pulled him down with her into the cradle, tangled in heat and skin and breath. The moment stretched, suspended like they were floating, like the ship was gone, like the universe had never needed anything else but this. The afterglow was quiet, almost reverent. They lay in silence, her head resting against his chest, his hand tracing slow patterns along the small of her back. She felt like fire and silk. Her ears twitched faintly as she breathed, and she let out a sound he hadn't expected. A soft, almost uncertain laugh. "What?" he asked, voice still hoarse. "I think I was programmed to do that," she said, not accusing, just curious. To bond. With someone. Maybe to imprint. His stomach flipped. "Like a heat cycle?" "Worse," she replied, lifting her head to look at him. "Like a lock. Like I was made to unlock something in someone else. Like you." He blinked. "Lyra, that doesn't make sense." "None of this makes sense," she said, and then sat up slowly. "But I feel different now. Like something inside me recognized you. Not just you, your presence, your scent, your voice, your body." Her words weren't embarrassed. They were clinical, almost hypnotic. He saw it in her expression, how she studied her own body now, like it belonged to someone else, someone new. "I wasn't like this before," she murmured. "I think you changed me. Or maybe they built you to react to me." "No," she said quickly. "This wasn't artificial. It felt too raw, too real." She looked down at her arms. "But I don't know who they are. I don't know what they wanted from me. Only that it wasn't this." He stood slowly and handed her a robe from the locker. She took it, slipping it over her shoulders, hiding the bruises, the beauty. "We need to find out who you are," he said, suddenly protective in a way he didn't fully understand. "Before they do," her eyes met his. "You think someone's looking for me?" "No." He turned toward the console and tapped into restricted military logs. "I know someone is." As if summoned, the ship shuddered. Not from engine malfunction, from a gravitational lock, an external field, powerful and invisible, now anchoring them in place. Alarms lit up, sensors spiked. She stood beside him, bare feet silent on the floor, her pupils narrowing unnaturally. "They found me," she said, not with fear, but with certainty. And under her skin a light began to pulse. Just once, then again, then faster. He couldn't sleep. Not after what the scan revealed. Not after the name, his name, echoed back at him from deep within her altered mind like a signal programmed into the dark. The silence of the ship, usually a comfort in deep patrol runs, now felt heavy and thick, like it was listening, watching, waiting for something to happen between them. Eli stared at the readouts glowing on his console, but all he saw was her face. Lyra. The way she looked at him, like she knew him better than he knew himself, like her soul had already mapped his before her body ever did. He kept hearing her voice, soft and electric, whispering his name from the wreckage, as if it were the only thing she'd ever been certain of. Her presence lingered in the ship like a scent, like a heat source, impossible to ignore. Eventually, he stood and made his way to the medbay. Footsteps hushed against the corridors. The lights were dimmed automatically, casting everything in soft amber glow. The medical sensors buzzed low, rhythmic, almost intimate, like a breath exhaled in sleep. She was there, resting in the diagnostic cradle, one leg drawn up loosely under the blanket, one arm thrown carelessly across her stomach. Her pale hair fanned out behind her, shimmering faintly even in low light, her fox-like ears twitching occasionally in her sleep. Her skin looked almost too soft, too flawless, like it had been engineered with care, yet bore small bruises at the edges of her wrists, the kind restraint cuffs would leave. He stood there for a long moment, unsure if he should speak or leave, until her eyes opened without warning and locked onto him. No fear, no startle, just slow awareness. "You came," she murmured, her voice lower than before, almost velvety. "I didn't dream it." "You didn't," he said, surprised by the rasp in his own voice. "Are you in pain?" "No," she said, but her fingers curled into the blanket as though resisting something. "But there's something." "What?" "Inside, like a heat, a pull. It started the moment you touched me. It hasn't stopped." His chest tightened. He could hear the hum of the ship, the steady rhythm of her vitals. But beneath that, there was a soundless pressure building in the air between them. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked, barely trusting his own question. Her answer came not in words, but in how the blanket slid just slightly down her body, bearing one shoulder, then the curve of her breast, the fabric catching like it had a mind of its own. Her skin glowed faintly with that strange inner light, and her gaze never left his. "No," she said softer now. "You make the heat quieter." His body tensed, not from fear, but something more primal. He stepped closer, and she sat up slowly, the blanket falling around her waist. She didn't try to hide herself. If anything, her posture invited him to see her, to acknowledge her as she was. Not fully human, not entirely alien, but something other, something that stirred every instinct in him. "There's something between us," she said, reaching up to touch his chest, her fingers warm through the fabric. "I don't know what it is, but I need to know if it's real." His breath hitched. "It's real," he said, because lying felt impossible in front of her. She nodded once, then leaned forward, her lips ghosting over his neck, not quite kissing, just breathing him in. "Then help me," she whispered. "Make it stop." She didn't mean pain. She meant the ache, the pressure building inside her since the wreck. He didn't know if it was genetic, engineered, or emotional. He didn't care. In that moment, all he knew was that he was the only anchor she had in this strange return to life, and she was quickly becoming his gravity too. He pulled her gently into his arms, and she melted into him like she belonged there, her fingers curling into his hair as her breath trembled against his ear. Every touch between them sparked something hotter than logic. Every glance lingered too long, every heartbeat drummed in unison. She tilted her head, her silver eyes burning softly, and kissed him. Slow, searching, like she was tasting a memory she never had. He responded before thought could stop him, his hand sliding over the bare skin of her back, the curve of her spine too warm, too alive. Their bodies fit like puzzle pieces designed in another world. She made a soft sound into his mouth, half whimper, half purr, and pulled him down with her into the cradle, tangled in heat and skin and breath. The moment stretched, suspended like they were floating, like the ship was gone, like the universe had never needed anything else but this. The afterglow was quiet, almost reverent. They lay in silence, her head resting against his chest, his hand tracing slow patterns along the small of her back. She felt like fire and silk. Her ears twitched faintly as she breathed, and she let out a sound he hadn't expected, a soft, almost uncertain laugh. "What?" he asked, voice still hoarse. "I think I was programmed to do that," she said, not accusing, just curious. "To bond. With someone. Maybe to imprint." His stomach flipped. "Like a heat cycle?" "Worse," she replied, lifting her head to look at him. "Like a lock. Like I was made to unlock something in someone else. Like you." He blinked. "Lyra, that doesn't make sense." "None of this makes sense," she said, and then sat up slowly. "But I feel different now. Like something inside me recognized you. Not just you. Your presence, your scent, your voice, your body." Her words weren't embarrassed. They were clinical, almost hypnotic. He saw it in her expression, How she studied her own body now like it belonged to someone else. Someone new. "I wasn't like this before," she murmured. "I think you changed me. Or maybe they built you to react to me." "No," she said quickly. "This wasn't artificial. It felt too raw, too real." She looked down at her arms. "But I don't know who they are. I don't know what they wanted from me. Only that it wasn't this." He stood slowly and handed her a robe from the locker. She took it, slipping it over her shoulders, hiding the bruises, the beauty. "We need to find out who you are," he said, suddenly protective in a way he didn't fully understand. "Before they do." Her eyes met his. "You think someone's looking for me?" "No." He turned toward the console and tapped into restricted military logs. "I know someone is." As if summoned, the ship shuddered, not from engine malfunction, from a gravitational lock, an external field, powerful and invisible, now anchoring them in place. Alarms lit up, sensors spiked. She stood beside him, bare feet silent on the floor, her pupils narrowing unnaturally. "They found me," she said, not with fear, but with certainty, and under her skin a light began to pulse. Just once, then again, then faster. "Is it a tracker?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "It's a signal. To them. To something inside me." Her voice trembled now, but not from fear, from anticipation. "They planted something, not just in my genes, in my mind. It's waking up." "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steadying even as the weight of unknowns pressed in on them. She staggered, grabbing the edge of the console, as if her body suddenly became too much to hold upright. Her skin shimmered faintly, sweat breaking across her brow, and her breathing grew shallow. "It's like a door opening in my head," she whispered, "like something is stepping through me. Lyra, talk to me. What's happening?" Her eyes snapped to his, wide and luminescent. "I think I'm not alone." The lights dimmed, not from power loss, but from something intentional. The entire ship's environment shifted. Temperature dropped. Air tasted metallic. Something old, ancient even, stirred in the core systems, bypassing firewalls, whispering in old machine code. The walls began to pulse faintly, rhythm syncing with the light inside her chest. "They're accessing me remotely," she gasped, "but they didn't expect me to connect with you." "That gives us an edge," as he said, already moving to the weapons cache. "We're not letting anyone take you back." "They won't come for me," she said, stepping forward now, trembling but not falling. "They'll come for you, because I'm bound to you now. That was the trigger, me bonding with you." Her words chilled him deeper than the freezing air. "What happens now?" "I don't know," she said, closing the space between them, grabbing his face with both hands. "But I can't lose you. If they take you, I'll break." "Then we fight," he said. "Together." The comms flared. An incoming hail, unmarked. "Origin, unknown system." The message was audio only. The voice on the other end was female, smooth, elegant, but undeniably inhuman. "Unit 93XV. Biological tether confirmed. Return the bonded asset or face termination sequence." He looked at Lyra. "They mean you." She shook her head slowly. "No, they mean you." The light in her chest flared white hot. The countdown began. And the door to their past, whatever it truly was, had already opened. The voice crackled again through the comms, synthetic yet oddly sensual, like it was trying to seduce obedience through fear. "Biological tether confirmed. Return the bonded asset or face termination sequence. You have 60 seconds to comply." The words didn't match any known language family, but somehow Eli understood them perfectly, as though they were imprinted directly into his cerebral cortex. Lyra's hand found his, trembling but tightening, and the glow beneath her skin flared brighter, now pulsing visibly through the thin fabric of her robe. He pulled her behind him instinctively and moved toward the navigation console, fingers flying across controls as he attempted to disengage the gravity lock holding the Arcadia hostage. The engines whined but didn't answer. The entire ship had been frozen by whatever tech was embedded in the incoming transmission. "We're being invaded from the inside," Eli muttered, realizing the ship's AI was no longer responding. "They've overridden the command core." "I told you," Lyra said through gritted teeth, her body shaking harder now. "They didn't expect us to bond. It triggered a failsafe. Failsafe for what? He asked, though the answer was dawning on him even as he spoke. Lyra's voice dropped low, almost inaudible. For extermination. At once, the lights throughout the ship flickered violently. The engines spun up in reverse. Artificial gravity began to destabilize. Emergency sirens screamed, but not with the usual robotic tones. These sounded panicked, organic, like the ship itself was afraid. Eli grabbed the rail with one hand, pulling Lyra close with the other. Hold on, he growled. I'm overriding manually. They'll kill you, she gasped, her eyes wide, glowing silver against the flickering darkness. I'd rather that than give you back to whatever twisted experiment made you. His hand found the emergency junction tucked behind the comms port. Wrenching it open, he exposed a neural interface override. Illegal tech, but he had his reasons for keeping it. He jammed the connector into his forearm implant and slammed the bridge controls into direct neural sync. His mind surged forward into the ship's system like a current into water. Data screamed past him. Firewalls cracked. He saw it all. Code, maps, hidden back doors. But also, he saw the thing inside Lyra. Not her, the other presence. The root system buried deep in her cognitive layer, locked until she touched him. It was awake now, and it was trying to take over. Not just her, him, everything. Lyra cried out behind him. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, clawing at her temples. It's speaking, she sobbed. Not words, just hunger. Stay with me, Eli gritted, pouring raw resistance into the neural link, shoving his mind deeper into the command node. He found the source of the gravity lock. It wasn't external. It was her. Her body had been transmitting a tether beacon the whole time, buried in her biology. They hadn't just made her, they made her a weapon, a lure, a fail-safe bomb. And he had just set her off. With a scream that tore through silence and metal alike, Lyra arched her back and exploded in light. Eli was thrown backward against the console, skidding into the wall. The power grid shorted. Sparks rained. The entire ship dropped into blackout. But in that pitch dark, her body remained glowing, suspended midair, her skin emitting ultraviolet pulses like sonar waves. Her voice was layered now, hers and another, deeper, metallic. Biological tether successful. Command relink in process. Host engaged. Lyra, Eli croaked, pushing off the wall. Fight it. I don't know how, she sobbed beneath the mechanical overlay, floating like a marionette strung up by invisible wires. It's bigger than me. Then we take it apart piece by piece, he growled. He moved toward her, ignoring the hum building inside his skull. Static crawled across his skin. The floor vibrated. Her form twisted, pain etching her face as something invisible tugged her backward. Don't let go, she whispered, no matter what it does to me. I won't, he said, and reached for her hand. Contact. He wasn't in the ship anymore. His consciousness exploded into a blinding void, where gravity didn't exist and time stuttered like a broken metronome. All around him were fragments of memories that didn't belong to him. Laboratories of glass and bone, voices that buzzed like insects, sirens plunging into pale skin, and always, always her eyes watching from inside the containment tank. Lyra had been bred for one purpose, to awaken the gate. The gate wasn't a place, it was a being, a collective mind older than galaxies, buried in forgotten code inside the fabric of sentient networks. It couldn't break through alone. It needed a key, a host, and more than that, it needed an emotional trigger strong enough to unlock higher consciousness. Love, that was the code. Not logic, not war, but connection. Something no machine had ever truly grasped. Lyra wasn't just the host, she was the key, and he, by bonding with her, had become the door. The shock threw him back into reality like a wave vomiting him onto shore. He gasped, eyes wide, covered in sweat. Lyra had collapsed, smoke rising from her shoulders, the glow flickering erratically. It's too much, she whispered. I'm breaking. No, you're not, he said, cradling her. We'll shut it down. Together. We can't shut it down, she said, her voice weak. It's in me now. And in you. Then we cut it out, he said. Tell me how. She blinked slowly, then pressed her forehead to his. You'll have to kill me. No, he snapped. There's another way. Then find it fast, she gasped, because something's boarding the ship. The hull rang with the impact. The airlock depressurized. They were no longer alone. The lights surged as emergency power returned in flickers. Red strobes bathed the corridor in pulses of warning. Eli grabbed a pulse rifle from the wall mount and pulled Lyra behind the nearest bulkhead. Heavy steps echoed through the ship's spine. Too heavy to be human, too fluid to be mechanical. A figure emerged, tall, humanoid but elongated, its limbs jointed at odd angles, its skin a chitinous black that shimmered like oil in the dim light. Its eyes were slits of moving fire. It stopped in front of the medbay, scanning. Then it spoke, not with a voice, but with resonance that vibrated in Eli's chest. Return the gate vessel. The bond has corrupted her. She must be cleansed. Over my dead body, Eli whispered. That can be arranged. The being moved with impossible speed. Eli opened fire. The blast lit the corridor like a miniature sun. Eli's pulse rifle kicked back hard against his shoulder, hurling energized rounds into the creature's chest. But they didn't slow it. The armor-like plates covering its body deflected the first 3 shots, and the fourth only made it stagger half a step. Then it moved, so fast, like it didn't obey the same rules of motion, like time bent around its limbs. It closed the distance in a blink, and Eli barely managed to roll aside as a clawed arm smashed into the wall where his head had been, leaving a deep gash in the alloy. Lyra cried out from behind the bulkhead, her hand raised like she was trying to shield him, but her energy flickered like a dying flame, and no pulse followed. "Stay down," he shouted, rolling to his feet, swinging the rifle up again. This time he aimed for the slits of moving fire in its head. The thing jerked its body sideways, twisted, inhumanly flexible, dodging his shot by contorting its upper torso like it had no spine. It hissed, then lunged again. Eli ducked under its swipe and dove for the auxiliary panel, jamming his palm against the emergency breach lockdown. A bulkhead slammed shut between them and the creature, locking it momentarily in the medbay area. For now, his lungs burned. Lyra was on her knees, her breath shallow, her eyes wide and glowing too brightly. "It's one of the keepers," she whispered. "They were made to contain the gate. I wasn't supposed to awaken near one. That's why I was kept in stasis." "Great," Eli muttered. "They're like your babysitters. And now they think I'm the dirty babysitter who kissed the alien princess." Her lips twitched at that, almost a smile, but her body trembled too violently for humor. "They won't stop," she said, crawling forward. "Even if you kill it, there will be more. They can smell the bond now. It's in your scent. In mine. We're marked." "Then we unmark it," he said. "Tell me how." "We can't," she whispered. "The only way is to complete the bond. To finish the cycle." "What does that mean?" he asked, voice tight, even as his heart pounded with dread. She looked up at him, the light pulsing under her skin, slowly sinking with the red strobe of the ship's alarm. "You have to merge with me fully, not physically, mentally, spiritually. Whatever this thing was designed for. It doesn't end with intimacy. That was just the first gate. There's another." "Another what?" "A second resonance," she said, reaching for his hand. "One that overrides the gate's command protocols. If we're truly bonded, we can overwrite their claim." "That sounds like magic," he said. "It's worse," she replied. "It's trust." The sarcasm vanished from his face. "You're serious?" She nodded. "We do it, or they take you apart neuron by neuron until the tether breaks. And then they'll reformat me for another attempt. Maybe with someone else." He clenched his jaw. "Not happening." "Then take me," she said, her voice raw, aching. "All of me, mind to mind." "Here?" he asked. "Now?" "There won't be another chance," she said, crawling closer, her fingers threading through his hair. "They'll break through that door in under a minute. And once they do, if we're not linked completely, you'll die. And I'll lose everything." He dropped the rifle. His hands rose to cup her face. Her breath trembled against his lips, and her pupils dilated until only the silver remained. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Kiss me," she said. "But mean it." And he did. Their mouths met again, but not like before. This wasn't heat or hunger. This was surrender, fusion. Their thoughts collided the moment their lips touched. Not words, but memories. He saw flashes of her childhood in the tank, synthetic sunlight, electric pain. She saw his father's funeral, the rain, the long silence after. He felt her loneliness like a scream in a vacuum. She felt his love like a wildfire. They sank into each other, deeper than flesh, deeper than thought. Their nervous systems lit up, sparking through ship systems. The AI, still corrupted, tried to reject the surge, but the connection bypassed every firewall like it wasn't tech at all. It was instinct, evolution. Her body flared with bioluminescence, her hands gripping his shirt, their foreheads pressed tight, eyes locked as their minds completed the circuit. A wave pulsed out from them in all directions. It slammed into the walls, into the deck, into the approaching keeper. On the other side of the bulkhead, the creature shrieked, its voice breaking apart like glass in fire. The lights flickered white. The door buckled, but not from intrusion. From force inside pushing out. The stasis room glowed now with a strange white-blue mist. A dome of energy formed around them, humming, pulsing, reacting. "I feel you," Lyra whispered, "even in places I didn't know I had." "I'm not letting go," Eli said, "even if this kills us both." "It won't," she said, voice stronger now. "We're becoming something they didn't plan for." The keeper slammed into the door again, its claws glowing hot from the heat of friction. Sparks flew. The dome trembled. Lyra screamed, not from pain, but from power. She rose off the floor again, this time not limp, not controlled. She was radiant. Light spiraled from her spine like wings, translucent, moving. Her hair whipped around her face and her voice filled the air, unearthly. "I am not yours." She lifted her hand, palm forward, toward the door. "He is mine." The energy collapsed inward and then exploded. The explosion of light wasn't violent, yet it carried the force of a supernova in silence. The energy sphere around them pulsed once, then expanded outward like a breath held too long, finally released. The sealed bulkhead between them and the keeper didn't just bend or crumple, it disintegrated into molecular dust. The creature had no time to react. It staggered back, claws raised defensively, but the wave of bonded resonance had already hit it, not as a weapon of destruction, but of rejection. The thing screamed, a sound that bypassed the ears and drilled straight into the bones, its body twisting as cracks split across its armor-like exoskeleton. It staggered as if its code, its core programming, was being rewritten by a force it had never evolved to resist. Then it collapsed, convulsed, and melted into a pool of dark, twitching fragments that evaporated moments later into mist. Eli stared in stunned silence, his chest heaving. Lyra's feet touched the floor gently as the last of the light faded from her skin. She swayed, almost collapsed, and he rushed forward, catching her in his arms before she could hit the floor. Her pulse fluttered beneath his fingertips like a trapped star. "Are you okay?" he asked, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. She opened her eyes slowly, silver pupils dilated, her body shaking. "I am now," she whispered. "They can't take me back." "Because of the bond?" "Because I chose it," she said, pressing her forehead to his. "They designed me to respond, to match, to adapt. But they didn't expect free will. They didn't expect I'd want someone, that I'd fight for someone." His arms tightened around her. "Then let them come," he said, the fire in his voice surprising even him. "I'll burn every one of them down before I let them touch you again." She exhaled a shaky laugh, fingers clutching the collar of his shirt. "You have no idea what you just said yes to." "Try me," he murmured. "You just bonded with a living gate," she whispered. "Whatever I was before, an experiment, a vessel. I'm more now, and so are you." The ship groaned beneath them like it had heard and was trying to process the changes coursing through its systems. The lights no longer flickered red, but glowed with soft, unfamiliar hues, blues and violets, and something in between. The very walls hummed like they were part of Lyra's nervous system now. The Arcadia had been rewritten, or perhaps repurposed. Eli stood, helping Lyra to her feet, as a panel near the main terminal opened on its own. It wasn't mechanical. It unfolded like organic tissue, revealing a new interface, smooth, pulsing with alien patterns. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra walked toward it slowly, drawn, eyes wide with recognition. "A map," she said, fingers hovering just above the symbols. Of what? Gateways, she said. Anchors. Places like me. Others they made. Others like me who didn't escape. You mean there are more of you? Her lips trembled. Yes, I can feel them now. Distant, but they're calling. Eli's fist clenched. If they're prisoners, we save them. It's not that simple, she said, eyes still locked on the floating glyphs. Some won't want to be saved. Some are already gone. Some may see you, us, as the enemy now. He stepped up beside her, gaze hard. Then we show them what free looks like. She looked at him, something soft and infinite unfolding in her eyes. You'd go to war for me? I already did, he said. I just didn't know it yet. The inner face pulsed, reacting to their proximity, their connection. A star chart bloomed, not in physical coordinates, but emotional resonance points, places where gate beings had activated, some weak, some blazing like suns. The keepers would be heading there, maybe already had, and now so would they. The gate was never meant to control, Lyra said suddenly, her voice taking on that layered tone again. It was meant to awaken. To what? To choice, she said. To love. To resistance. Then let's give them all a reason to resist. Alarms flared again, but this time not from threat. Incoming transmission. Multiple. Not from the keepers. From across space. From other ships, other minds. Voices raw and broken and desperate. Is someone there? One voice crackled. Please, we had a gate child. They took her. We couldn't stop them. This is Dravek's outpost. We lost containment on subject Nara 7. She's missing. Last signal came from the Orvian sector. To whoever hears this, if you've made contact with the vessel, with her, tell her we forgive her. Tell her she was never a monster. Eli looked at Lyra. Her lips parted. They're all waking up. He touched the panel beside her. Then let's bring them home. The ship answered before she could. The engine core spun up, not with fuel, but with her resonance. The Arcadia didn't just move. It leapt. Not through space, but through something deeper, more primal. Between beats of time, the stars blurred into lines. The universe held its breath. Eli stood with Lyra at the heart of the ship, her hand in his, her light echoing inside him. They were no longer just pilot and passenger, not even lovers. They were something older, something newer, something the keepers could never control. The gate was open now, and it whispered his name. The jump ended like a cosmic sneeze. 1 second they were streaking across the void, energy crackling through the bones of the ship like lightning in a glass bottle, and the next they dropped out of whatever phase shift Lyra's resonance had triggered, falling into real space with a disorienting lurch that made Eli grip the edge of the console and say something deeply unheroic under his breath. They landed hard. Not crash hard, but not graceful either. More like a cosmic belly flop. The Arcadia groaned in protest, her internal systems whirring back into place like someone had shaken her after a long nap she didn't consent to. Sparks shot out from one of the wall panels and the lighting flickered dramatically before settling into a strange, new blue hue that was, frankly, not in any manufacturer's specs. Eli straightened slowly, his back cracking in 3 places he didn't know existed, then turned to Lyra, who was floating a few inches off the floor again like she had forgotten how gravity worked. She looked down at herself, frowned, and dropped with a soft thump. Okay, she said, brushing imaginary dust off her robe, still figuring out the whole not being a portal to an interdimensional God thing. You and me both, Eli muttered, checking the proximity sensors. Where did we even land? The readout was mostly gibberish. The local star map didn't match anything in the Union's official archive. Nearby celestial bodies were marked as unclassified mass A through F, which told him absolutely nothing useful. Well, he sighed, we're either incredibly lucky or totally screwed. Maybe both, Lyra said, her voice light, but her eyes scanning the ship's systems with a little more intensity than before. It looks like we're near something. There's a signal ping bouncing off us. Is it human? No. She paused. Not keeper either. It's, curious. That's a new category, Eli said, flicking a switch to boost the transmission. Curious alien signals. Should I prepare cookies or weapons? Probably both, Lyra said. walking barefoot to the console, her tail of white silver hair swishing behind her, as if it had developed its own opinions. Eli tried very hard not to look at the way her robe kept slipping off one shoulder like a flirtatious accident, and focused instead on the alert blinking red in the upper corner. "There's a docking signal being sent," he said. "They're asking for a secure link. Language match is partial. It's using old Zarathian root code?" Lyra's head tilted. "Wait, I know that. It was the base structure they used in the first lab. That means whoever's out there might have worked on the project. Friend or foe?" "How should I know?" she said, exasperated. "I woke up covered in ship shrapnel and someone else's cargo manifest." "Fair," Eli muttered. "All right, I'm initiating the link. If we die, I want it on record that you still owe me breakfast in bed." "If we die, I owe you a lot more than breakfast," Lyra said with a little smirk that did exactly nothing to help his concentration. The screen flared. A face appeared. Sort of. It was too close to the camera. Enormous yellow eyes blinking at them with the confused innocence of someone who had never used a comm system before. The face looked vaguely humanoid, but with too many eyelids and a nose that pulsed gently when it breathed. "Ah," the alien said, pulling back. "Is this the portal-bound flesh anchor of Lyra, 92201? Eli blinked. What?" Lyra winced. "That's me." The alien peered closer. "Ah, yes. Confirmation achieved. Bonded male is aesthetically pleasing. Strong jaw structure, fertile symmetry. Acceptable." "Excuse me?" Eli choked. The alien continued undeterred. "We have prepared the ritual chamber. Please bring the anchor forward. We shall initiate the joining." "We already did the joining," Eli said. "If this is about more weird gate magic, I'd like to see the fine print first." The alien paused, then looked vaguely embarrassed. "Oh, apologies, we assumed you had not yet completed full neural resonance bonding. Most species prefer a formal ceremony. With fruit." "I had coffee," Eli said. "Does that count?" "No," the alien said. "Coffee is a war crime where I come from." The feed went fuzzy and then cut out. Lyra stared at the blank screen. "Okay, that wasn't the weirdest conversation I've had, but it's in the top 5. Why do I feel like we just got invited to our own wedding without consent?" Eli muttered, rubbing his temples. "Because you kind of did," Lyra said, then added quickly. "But it's mostly symbolic, I think." "Symbolic how?" "There might be body paint involved." "Nope," Eli said, standing. "Nope. I draw the line at alien rituals that involve fruit, paint, or unsolicited fertility assessments." "Too late," Lyra said with a half smile. "They're docking." A loud clang echoed through the hull. The ship shuddered slightly and then the hatch lights blinked green. "Let's just try not to insult anyone," Lyra said. "These kinds of civilizations are usually very big on ceremony." "Got it," Eli said, strapping on a utility belt that had exactly one tool and one gun, which felt like a fair summary of his personality. "Smile, nod, and don't mention coffee." "Exactly," she said, and together they approached the airlock. The doors opened, and everything changed. The airlock hissed open with a sigh that sounded far too sensual for a metal door, and Eli instinctively placed himself half a step in front of Lyra, hand near his sidearm, just in case whatever waited outside mistook ritual bonding for sacrificial dismemberment. But what greeted them wasn't fire or weapons or chance. It was a carpet, a bright, almost offensively plush violet carpet that unrolled itself automatically from the docking tube all the way to the floor of their airlock with the enthusiasm of a puppy who'd been trained to fetch in 5 languages. "Oh gods," Lyra whispered. "They brought the ceremonial runner." "Is that a good sign?" Eli asked, eyeing the way the carpet shimmered under his boots like it might have emotions. "That depends," she replied, adjusting her robe again as it threatened to expose another inch of shoulder that Eli pretended not to notice. "If it's the runner made of Nerethan velvet, it means welcome. If it's the runner that hums old battle hymns, it means trial by combat. Both are purple." "And this one?" Eli asked. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Let's just hope it doesn't start singing." As if on cue, a series of small, hovering drones zipped into place around the corridor, each holding what appeared to be glowing, oversized feathers. They began to sway in synchronized motion as a soft chime rang out, and then a voice, elegant, polished, and deeply confused, said in accented Union Common, "Please welcome the prime seed vessel and her lovely mate to the ceremonial transition chamber. May your union fertilize the stars." Eli froze. "I beg your pardon?" Lyra turned to him, eyes wide. "Okay, I might have underestimated how seriously this culture takes symbolic bonding. They called me a mate, Lyra," Eli said, gesturing at the hovering feather drones. "And I'm pretty sure that's a sentient pillow trying to seduce me." One of the floating orbs hovered too close and brushed against Eli's cheek with a slow, deliberate stroke that could only be described as legally suggestive. "Consent not yet fully established," it said, then hovered away with a dreamy sigh. "Okay," Eli said, backing up slightly. "I take back everything I said about this not being the weirdest day of my life. This is the top spot now." Lyra stifled a laugh, though her ears twitched in a way that made him suspicious. "You're enjoying this," he muttered. "Just a little," she admitted. "You're very cute when flustered." "I'm not flustered," he lied. "I'm preparing a diplomatic response." "Of course you are," she said, taking his hand. "Come on, let's just get through the ritual, smile, bow, let them bless our interstellar chakras or whatever, and get back to figuring out how to stop the Keepers from rewriting reality with my ovaries." "Fair plan," Eli muttered. "Still want breakfast after this?" "Desperately," she said. They walked together down the softly glowing path. Their pace matched, the sensors along the ceiling projecting soft beams of bioluminescent patterns across the walls like swimming jellyfish made of light. It should have been beautiful. It should have been spiritual. Instead, it was slightly terrifying and deeply awkward. The chamber they entered at the end of the corridor was immense, round and pulsing with organic curves that suggested someone in architecture school had taken a biology class and never quite recovered. Dozens of tall, lanky beings in layered robes stood in a semicircle, each one with a slightly different hue of skin: amethyst, emerald, sapphire, and all with elongated faces and an unsettling habit of never blinking. The one in the center stepped forward, arms extended. "Welcome," she said, her voice low and warm, "to the sanctuary of sacred reawakening. You arrive at a moment of unique resonance. The gate sings through you both." "We're still figuring out the lyrics," Eli said under his breath. The priestess blinked slowly, once with great ceremony, and then gestured to the central dais where a pair of seats sat waiting. Except they weren't seats. They were cushions. Oversized velvet, suspiciously warm-looking cushions shaped like interlocking spirals. "Please," she said, "join in harmonic repose." "They want us to cuddle," Eli whispered. "It's not cuddling," Lyra whispered back. "It's meditative synchronization. It's space cuddling." "Sit down," she hissed, grabbing his wrist. They settled awkwardly onto the cushions, which promptly molded to their bodies like sentient beanbags with opinions. A low hum began to vibrate through the floor, and the air shimmered as fine mist sprayed gently across their faces. Eli inhaled accidentally and gagged slightly. "What is that?" "Mood stabilizer," Lyra said calmly. "Relax, let it in. It tastes like flower-scented anxiety. You'll get used to it." "Will I?" "Shh, they're starting." The priestess raised her arms. "Let the sacred awkwardness of the first touch give way to the bliss of the bonded becoming." Eli opened one eye. "Did she just say awkwardness?" "It's a literal translation," Lyra muttered. "The actual word means the sacred discomfort of emotional honesty." "Oh, good," Eli said. "So basically, couples therapy with incense." A series of melodic chimes rang out as the beings surrounding them began to sway gently in rhythm, their hands held out, palms up, as if offering their collective energy. Lyra's fingers slipped between his. She turned to him, face suddenly serious. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, and squeezed her hand. "Just never thought I'd bond with someone who glows when she's turned on and can summon psychic furniture." "It's been a weird week," she agreed. "But you'd do it again?" "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "Even with the humming pillows." She laughed and the room pulsed with brighter light, as though her joy had been absorbed by the walls. The priestess stepped forward. "The union stabilizes. The resonance is true. You have passed the first embrace." "Does that mean we can leave?" Eli asked. "No," she said serenely. Now comes the second embrace. I don't want to know what that is, he muttered. Too late, Lyra whispered. I think it involves ceremonial dancing. And then the music started. The music that began was not what Eli expected. He had braced for ceremonial drums, slow flutes, maybe something eerie with too many wind instruments and not enough melody. What came out instead sounded suspiciously like jazz. Alien jazz, yes, with tonal scales that bent in directions his ears weren't entirely happy about. But still, jazz. With rhythm, with soul, with a bass line that said sway your hips or die trying. Is that saxophone? Eli whispered. It's a mind horn, Lyra whispered back. Plays by reading the performer's emotional state. So it's playing what someone's feeling. Yes. Whoever's performing is definitely thinking about hips. Or thighs, Lyra added thoughtfully. There's a lot of lower body emotion happening. The priestess gestured toward them again, this time with a tilt of her head that felt too meaningful to ignore. The cushions shifted beneath them, gently urging them upright. The mist intensified, glowing faintly, and suddenly the floor around the dais lit up in concentric circles of soft amber light. It's the second embrace, Lyra murmured. We have to interpret our union through motion. They want us to dance? In harmony. I haven't danced since Pilot Academy. I stepped on a commander's foot and caused a diplomatic incident. Just follow me, she said, standing. Her robe flowed around her like liquid starlight, the strange fabrics adjusting with her body as though remembering shapes. She turned to him and extended her hand. He stared for a second, then slowly took it. The moment he did, the lights shifted again. A breeze whispered through the chamber, even though there were no vents. The watchers around them began to hum softly, a harmonic chorus of anticipation. Lyra led, gracefully, sensually. Her body swayed in fluid arcs, and Eli did his best not to look like a malfunctioning droid beside her. Just feel it, she whispered, spinning into his arms. Let it move through you. What is it? He asked. Us, she said. The bond. It has a rhythm now. He tried, he really did. And after a few awkward shuffles and one near fall that resulted in a surprised yelp from one of the floating feather drones, he began to move in sync with her. The crowd hummed louder. Lights shifted colors in ripples across the dome. They spun together, slow then fast, laughing breathlessly. Her foot slipped once and collided with his shin. He winced. Sorry, she gasped. That was my ceremonial toe. No problem, he grunted. I didn't need my leg nerves anyway. She caught his hand again, steadied him, and then, without warning, vaulted into a low dip that left her hanging back in his arms, hair fanned out, chest rising and falling, lips parted. Wow, he whispered. That was smooth? I'm full of surprises, she said, and then yanked him forward with enough force to send him stumbling. He landed against her, both of them tangled and breathless, faces inches apart. The room erupted in a chime of approval. Interpretation complete, the priestess intoned. The bond is alive. It breathes. It dances. That's a sentence, Eli muttered, still catching his breath. You did well, Lyra said, brushing hair from his forehead. I thought I looked like a collapsing moon crab. You did, she said, but a very enthusiastic one. I aim to please. You succeeded. A soft bell echoed through the chamber, and the priestess stepped forward once more. She placed her hands gently on Lyra's shoulders, then on Eli's chest, and closed her eyes. The sacred resonance is sealed. Your bond cannot be undone. You are now known across this sector as a unified pair. Wait, Eli said, blinking. As in legally, biologically, spiritually, existentially. What about emotionally? Pending, the priestess said with a wink. Eli stared. Did she wink at me? Yes, Lyra said. I think you're officially married in 6 dimensions. Oh, good. Does that come with insurance? Only if you survive the honeymoon. They turned to leave hand in hand, laughing softly, the ritual behind them and the unknown ahead. But just as the airlock sealed behind them, the Arcadia gave a lurch. The lights dimmed and the console flared with red script. We've got company, Eli said, rushing to the controls. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she scanned the data. Not keepers, something else. Something bigger. Pirates? No. She tapped the sensor field. Something's wrong. That's a Union vessel. Military. Flagship. Why would the Union be here? Because they finally noticed I disappeared, she said softly. And they're not here to rescue us. They're here to take us apart. The ship's comm crackled. Unidentified vessel. This is the USS Halberd, flagship of the Zarathian Accord. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be interpreted as hostile engagement. Eli looked at Lyra. She looked back at him. Then she grinned. Well, guess the honeymoon's over. He grabbed the rifle. Let's make them earn the divorce. The warning light still flashed in angry pulses across the bridge. The Halberd's proximity only a few clicks away. A beast of cold metal and authority descending upon them with a clear purpose. Yet in that narrow silence between alarms, between the next decision and the next move, something shifted in the way Lyra looked at him. Eli felt it before he saw it, like the electric change in air before lightning touches ground. She stood by the main panel, one hand still on the edge of the console, her hair backlit by the screen's glow, her chest rising and falling in an unsteady rhythm that had nothing to do with panic. He looked at her and saw not just the fighter, not just the alien mystery who could manipulate ancient energy fields with a glance, but the woman, the soft curve of her bare shoulder peeking from her robe, the wild flicker in her silver eyes, the way she breathed like she was holding something in that had been building long before any enemy arrived. They're going to breach us in 5 minutes, he said, voice low and rough. We need a plan. We already had one, she replied, her voice strangely soft. We ran. We bonded. We opened the gate. Now they've come to sever it. But maybe we do something else first. Her fingers slid down the side of the console, and she walked toward him slowly, deliberately, like a tide coming for the shore. Lyra, he said, heart thundering as she stopped just inches from him. This isn't the best timing. It's the only timing, she whispered. They could kill us. They could take me. They could rewrite you. But I need to remember this moment not as running, not as hiding, not as fearing. I want it to be about us, about this. She reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers trailing along the line of his jaw. You look at me like I'm more than what they made me. I want to feel that before the world tries to tear it away. He caught her hand and held it against his cheek. You are more than what they made, and if this is the only time we get, then it belongs to us, not them. She kissed him. This time it wasn't soft or exploratory. This kiss carried intention, a quiet urgency. Her lips parting against his, breath mingling, her body pressing closer until there was nothing left but heat and the sound of hearts beating too fast. Her robe slipped from her shoulder entirely, and he caught it with one hand as it fell, letting his fingers trail along the bare skin of her arm. She was warmer now, not just temperature, but presence, her body radiating energy like she could burn him alive and make him thank her for it. He backed her gently toward the padded bench along the back wall of the bridge, each step slow, each touch building like music rising toward a crescendo. She let him guide her, but her hands were already working at the fastenings of his shirt, fingers nimble, impatient. Their clothes came off in layers, not tossed or flung, but peeled back with reverence, with discovery. She made soft sounds into his mouth, half laughter, half breathless surprise, as his hands found the smooth skin of her waist, her back, the delicate arch where her body met his perfectly. He laid her down on the bench, the lights above flickering in tune with the pulsing energy they shared. Her hair fanned out behind her like a halo, and he leaned over her, drinking in every curve, every rise and fall of breath. You're glowing again, he whispered, brushing his lips along her collarbone. Then don't stop, she whispered back. Make it brighter. He kissed down her throat, slow and deliberate, the heat between them building with every inch. Her hands roamed over him, over muscles and scars and the heat of his body, and he let himself fall into her entirely, into the taste of her skin, into the way she arched under him with every whisper of contact. When he entered her, it wasn't with frenzy but with awe, like crossing into a sacred place. She gasped and clutched him tighter, their rhythm slow at first, bodies adjusting, eyes never leaving one another. Then it became more, became everything. Every thrust a silent promise, every moan a shared declaration that in this moment they were not prey or fugitives or lab constructs. They were simply human and alien and desperately alive. She rolled her hips against his, breath catching with every motion, and he responded in kind, faster, deeper, lost in the warmth and the light, and the way she whispered his name, like it was the only word she trusted. Eli, she breathed, her voice breaking around the sound. Eli, please, don't stop. Don't let go. Never, he groaned, burying his face in her shoulder as the tension built higher, their bodies singing the same chord. The climax was not loud. It was not wild. It was powerful and quiet, like gravity shifting inside them, like the stars themselves holding their breath. They moved together through it, riding it, trembling, until all that was left was their breathing, their sweat, their joined hearts pounding in the aftermath. He lay beside her, wrapping his arms around her body, kissing the top of her head, whispering things he didn't know he was allowed to feel until she brought them out of him. I've never felt anything like that, she said softly. Not just physically. Something shifted. I feel like I'm even more real now. You are, he said. To me, you are. Her fingers laced with his as the ship trembled slightly again, the red lights flaring back into urgency. They're coming, she said, but I'm not afraid anymore. He stood, pulling on what parts of his uniform still worked, then handed her his jacket. She wore it like a second skin. He armed the weapons, locked down the consoles, and opened the comms. His voice, when it came out, was steel wrapped in fire. To the crew of the Halberd, this ship is not surrendering. The woman aboard is under my protection. You want her, you'll have to go through me. He looked at Lyra. She was standing tall beside him, her body still glowing faintly, her eyes alight with power. And I'm not something to be taken anymore, she said aloud. I choose who I am now. I choose this. The screen went silent, then a single response. So be it. Boarding sequence initiated. They had only minutes, but now they were ready. The sound of magnetic clamps locking onto the hull echoed through the Arcadia like distant thunder, low and steady, a heartbeat of steel preparing to burst. The boarding crew from the Halberd had made their move, and the final moments before their arrival stretched with the unbearable silence of the inevitable. Eli adjusted the final energy cell into his pulse rifle and turned to Lyra, who stood across the bridge in nothing but his jacket and her conviction. Her legs were bare, long and lithe, marked with faint glowing patterns beneath the skin, the afterglow of the resonance they had shared. Her hair flowed like silver fire around her face, and her lips were parted, breath deep but steady. She was breathtaking in a way that transcended species, language, or logic. She had been made to be a weapon, a vessel, but in his arms she had become something much more dangerous. She had become herself. You really should have let me dress, she said, arching a brow as she took the sidearm he offered. You look better like this, he replied without hesitation. Distracting. To them or to you? Yes. She smirked, but he caught the flicker of nerves in her expression. You're not alone in this, he said, stepping close. Whatever happens, I'm beside you. We fight. We win. Or we go out knowing we were never theirs to begin with. She nodded, then looked down, one hand tugging lightly at the jacket collar. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. That we bonded before this? He cupped her face gently, brushing a thumb across her cheek. It was the most right thing I've ever done. Her eyes shimmered. It changed me. It changed both of us. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I can still feel you inside me, like you're part of me now, not just physically, deeper. Same, he said, pulse rising. It's like our bodies remember each other even when we're not touching. She slid her arms around his waist, her head resting against his chest. I want to feel that again, she said, before they come. One more time. He froze. Here? Now? Yes, she whispered. We have 3 minutes. I want to go into this fight remembering what it means to be wanted, to be touched because I choose it, not because they programmed it. Her hands slid under his shirt, palms flat against his skin, fingers searching for warmth, for life, for connection. Lyra, don't think, she said. Just feel. He did. He pulled her up against him, lips crashing into hers with a hunger born not from fear, but from fierce defiance. Their bodies responded instantly, breath catching, skin sparking against skin. She pushed his shirt off his shoulders and let it fall, her hands running down his chest, nails grazing lightly, pulling a sound from his throat he didn't mean to make. She pressed him back against the wall of the bridge, her thigh sliding between his, her mouth moving down his neck. "You make me burn," she said. "You make me feel like I'm more than bones and experiments." He caught her under the thighs and lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around him as they kissed, mouths frantic and breathless. The controls flickered behind them, forgotten. Their bodies found each other again with a desperation that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with ownership. This time belonged to them, not to the scientists who built her or the soldiers who chased her. His hands explored her like a map he'd only just learned how to read. The curve of her back, the hollow behind her knee, the sensitive ridge of her ear that made her gasp when his lips brushed it. She pulled him into her, back arched, eyes locked with his, and they moved together not as strangers or lovers, but as something fused. The rhythm built fast. They didn't have time to slow down. She rode him with intensity, her hands clinging to his shoulders, her mouth seeking his with every thrust. He pressed her against the wall harder, deeper, their hips aligned, their pulses roaring like overlapping waves. Her voice came out in short, gasping syllables, every one of them his name. "Eli, Eli, please." "I'm here," he groaned, forehead pressed to hers. "I've got you." The pressure built faster this time. The connection was stronger now, more instinctive. Their climax hit like an explosion in reverse, silent but vast, every nerve in their bodies screaming with release. She clung to him, legs tightening, breath catching as her body shuddered around his. He came with her, helpless, driven by the look in her eyes and the sound of her whisper as she said his name like it was sacred. When it passed, they were still holding each other, hearts racing, sweat cooling on their skin. 2 minutes, she murmured against his lips. Was it worth it? Always, he said. And I'd do it again, even if they're at the door. She pulled herself gently from his arms and smoothed the edges of the jacket, her skin still glowing faintly from the aftermath. They'll expect a frightened alien girl and a nervous pilot, she said, voice low and dangerous. Let's give them gods. He grinned, chest bare, bruises blooming down his neck like battle tattoos. I love it when you talk like that. I'm serious, she said. We don't just resist. We define the terms of this encounter. So what? We open the door in slow motion, shirtless, with theme music? Exactly, she said, tossing him the rifle. And if the music doesn't start, I'll make it with my hips. Best co-pilot ever, he muttered, and followed her to the airlock. Together, they stood before the door. She adjusted the fit of the jacket, raised the sidearm in one hand, and licked her bottom lip with a little flick that made him forget what year it was. Ready? She asked. For war and for you, he replied. In that order? Depends how long the war takes. She laughed. The door hissed, and the fight began. The boarding ramp extended with a hiss like a serpent uncoiling, followed by the crunch of armored boots hitting metal deck. Eli and Lyra stood side by side, the blue warning lights spinning across their bare skin, and the bridge walls like ghosts circling a decision not yet made. The corridor filled with the rhythmic stomp of the incoming team, 6 soldiers in full exosuit armor, chrome-plated, polished, with visors blacked out and weapons raised. They looked like judgment made flesh. Behind them, stepping with the kind of calculated slowness only high command dared, came a woman. She was tall, dressed in black with golden trim, her dark skin like obsidian polished under starlight, eyes sharp, hard, and unreadable. Her voice was crisp when she spoke. Commander Eli Kale, you are out of protocol. You are sheltering an unregistered biological weapon. You are under arrest. Surrender now and you will be permitted a military trial. Do not resist. Eli didn't move. Beside him, Lyra turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable, but the soft glow under her skin returned. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. You've got this all wrong, Eli said, rifle lowered but tense in his hands. She's not a weapon. She's a person. And I didn't shelter her. I chose her. The woman's eyes narrowed. We're aware of the bonding event. The tether was confirmed through off-grid network traces. That makes you compromised, Commander. You are no longer considered an independent subject. Your decisions are invalid under the Union Charter. Then your charter is broken, Lyra said, stepping forward. Because I made a choice too. And I'm not property, I'm not a gate, I'm not a vessel, I'm Lyra, I'm alive. And you don't get to pull me apart because I stopped obeying your design. The lead officer raised his weapon. Subject Lyra 92201. Return to stasis or face containment by force. Try me, she said. The air crackled. A flash erupted. The first shot was fired by Union Command, but it never reached them. Lyra's hand lifted, faster than light, her fingers glowing. The blast curved midair and struck the ceiling harmlessly. Eli took the opening. He rolled left, opened fire, tagging the nearest soldier in the leg, sending sparks and hydraulic fluid spraying from the exosuit. The corridor exploded into chaos. Lyra moved like water through light. She ducked and twisted, her body flowing in perfect rhythm, limbs extending in arcs of grace and destruction. Her hands didn't hold a weapon. She was one. With every breath, her resonance rippled through the air, turning energy into barriers, misdirecting blasts, creating paths of resistance. Eli stayed close, his rifle never still, laying down suppressing fire as she danced through their attackers like a wraith. She moved with fury and purpose. He moved with precision and instinct, and they moved together. A perfect rhythm, a perfect team. One soldier lunged with a taser baton. Eli ducked and swept the legs. Lyra caught the man mid-fall and flung him into the airlock wall with a burst of kinetic pressure. Another raised a grenade launcher. Lyra yanked the pin from her sidearm, overcharged the charge pack with a thought, and launched it with pinpoint force into the launcher before it could prime. The resulting explosion knocked both sides off their feet. Eli rolled, landed hard beside her, coughed through the smoke, and found her eyes already locked on his. She was glowing brighter now, not dangerously, magnificently. "You're beautiful when you do that," he said. "You say that like I stopped." "Fair point," he said, then dove to the side as the commander entered the fray. She had shed the coat and revealed a powered combat frame beneath, slimmer than her soldiers, more advanced, flexible, faster. She fired at Lyra and hit. The bolt struck Lyra in the chest and flared across her skin like liquid fire. She screamed, stumbled, knees buckling. "No," Eli growled, surging forward. He fired at the commander, missed once, then tagged her in the shoulder, but the armor absorbed it. The woman spun, struck him with a force-amplified elbow to the ribs, and sent him sprawling. Lyra pushed herself upright, rage lighting her from within. "You don't get to take him," she hissed. "You don't get to erase what we are." The commander raised her arm, targeting system locking in. "You were never supposed to be," she said. "You are the consequence of an error." "Then let me be your last mistake," Lyra whispered. She extended her hands. The air thickened. It shimmered. The hallway blurred, and with a pulse of light and sound that felt like being kissed by gravity and punched by a star, the commander was thrown backward, armor fracturing, sensors screaming. She hit the wall, hard, slid down, and did not rise. Silence. The remaining soldiers hesitated. One dropped his weapon, another followed, and then the rest. They didn't flee, they just lowered their heads. Eli staggered up, bruised but alive, and walked to Lyra. She was shaking. The glow was fading. Her knees gave out. He caught her, held her. "You did it," he whispered. "We did," she said. "Together." He kissed her, slow and full of relief, of gratitude, of love wrapped in survival. The soldiers watched but didn't interrupt. Not anymore. He carried her back to the bridge, laid her gently on the couch. She was exhausted, skin hot, eyes fluttering shut. "Sleep," he said. "I'll be here when you wake." She smiled. "Next time, let me be on top." He choked on his breath. "You're hurt. You shouldn't be making jokes." "I'm not joking," she said, then passed out. He stared at her a long moment, and then laughed, soft and helpless. "Gods help me, I love her." The console beeped. A new signal incoming. Not Union. Something older. Something deeper. The gate was still open, and it had not finished speaking. But for now he stayed beside her, guarding her, loving her, ready for whatever came next. The low chime pulsed again from the bridge console, steady and deliberate, unlike any alert they had previously encountered. Eli rose from beside Lyra slowly, careful not to wake her. Her chest rose and fell in soft rhythm, her hair clinging to her temple with sweat. The glow beneath her skin dim but still present, still alive. He touched the back of her hand gently before turning toward the source of the sound. The console displayed no enemy ship, no approaching threat, no distress call. Instead, a single line hovered in amber text across the main screen, pulsing in time with a deep vibration barely audible beneath the hum of the Arcadia's systems. "Hello, Eli." He stared, fingers hovering above the command pad. "What the hell?" he muttered, then typed a response. "Who is this?" The words erased. New ones formed. "You already know." He blinked. "No," he whispered. But something inside him stirred. A memory he didn't know he had. A whisper of another voice. A place not real but familiar. The screen flickered. A video began to play. It wasn't a file stored on the Arcadia. It wasn't being transmitted from any outside source. It just appeared. A room. White. Sterile. Empty except for a single cot and a child sitting on it. The child was no older than 10, black hair falling over his eyes, arms wrapped tightly around his legs. He was humming. Eli's heart stopped. The boy looked up. Same nose, same jaw, same eyes. "That's me," he whispered. "But I don't remember this." Lyra stirred behind him. He turned, half hoping she was still asleep. But her eyes were open, wide, silver with confusion and something else. Fear. "Eli," she said, "that's not just a memory. That's a bleed." "A what?" "Sometimes when you resonate with something beyond time, you don't just see the future. It remembers you. That's not a recording. That's your past finally reconnecting to you through the gate." He turned back to the screen. The child on the cot looked directly into the camera, directly into him, and smiled. It was the saddest thing he had ever seen. The image flickered and warped, splitting into dual perspectives. Another room, another child, a girl this time. Pale white hair, ears twitching nervously. Her name was written in red across the bottom of the screen. Lyra, 9 to 22, 01. "No," she whispered, stepping forward. "This can't be." The two screens merged. Side by side, the two children sat in their separate rooms. Then they turned toward each other, as though they could see one another through the wall that separated them. And then they spoke. At the same time, one word, one name, "Eli." The boy said it. The girl whispered it, in perfect unison. Lyra collapsed into the nearest chair, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "We met," she said. "Not now. Not on the wreck. Before we were anything." "How could that be?" Eli asked, stunned. "I would remember. I would remember." "You were a donor," she said slowly, like her voice was following a thread buried deep inside her. "Not sperm, not blood, neural imprint. They took something from you as a child, your mind, your frequency, and they coded it into me, into all of us." The screen responded before they could speak. "Yes, you were the pattern, the first compatible soul, the only one who whispered back." Eli's knees buckled. "I was the prototype." The console flared again. A new image appeared. Not a child, a pod, metallic, cracked open, and inside it, a figure. Eli leaned closer. The face was obscured by steam, by time, but there was no mistaking the form. It was him. But not him. Older, worn, burned. "That's not possible," he said. Lyra stared at the image. "That's not your future. That's your origin." "What are you saying?" "You didn't just activate the gate," she said. "You came through it." The screen flashed. Temporal loop confirmed. Subject Eli Kale is a continuous constant. "I've done this before?" he asked. "How many times?" Lyra reached for his hand, squeezing it. "You're not just my tether. You're the source. Every version of me was built from a piece of you. Your DNA. Your echo." "Then why don't I remember?" he asked, choking on the words. "Why would they send me back?" The console dimmed. A final message appeared. "To save her, to save yourself, to break the loop." Suddenly alarms screamed, not boarding, not attack, but instability. Systems trembled. The ship shook. Lyra's glow returned full force. Her eyes flared silver white. "The gate's collapsing," she said. "The timeline can't hold the truth. It's tearing." "What happens if it snaps?" You forget, she said. We lose this. Everything. They reset it, rebuild me, rebirth you. He cupped her face. I'm not going to let that happen. The floor cracked. Reality itself wavered. The truth had broken the loop open, and now the universe would choose whether to let it stay. The ship shuddered again, but it was no longer reacting to enemy contact or external threat. It was responding to something internal, something old and buried waking up inside the hull like a forgotten heartbeat. Across every screen, old system logs flickered to life, unreadable patterns of code scrolling so fast they blurred into light. Symbols neither of them recognized danced in waves along the walls, as if the ship itself were becoming conscious. Lyra stumbled forward, catching herself against the console, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, the light bleeding from her skin like mist. It's sinking, she said, her voice distant, doubled. My code. Your presence. The ship was never just a ship. It's part of the loop, too. Eli stood frozen for a moment, watching as the metal under his feet seemed to ripple with a pulse he could feel in his spine. Are you saying this entire vessel is alive? Not alive. Bound. Like me. Like you. It's the last surviving structure from the original gate cycle. It's a carrier of memory, not just movement. Then why now? Why wake up now? Because the pattern recognized itself, she said, looking at him with awe and fear. You remembered. That changes everything. As if to answer, the hull split open without warning, not torn by explosion, but peeled back like the petals of some colossal flower, blooming in reverse. Outside was not space, not stars, but light. Blinding, endless, fractal light folding in upon itself. It stretched in every direction and none, infinite in depth, yet contained entirely within a single breath. Lyra screamed, clutching her chest. Her body lifted from the floor, suspended again as it had been in the medbay. But now it wasn't the keeper signal or bonding surge holding her. It was recognition. The gate, the real gate, had found her. And found him. A voice filled the air, not spoken but felt, like thought pressed against the soul. You are not the first. You are the end. Eli staggered back. What does that mean? The voice continued, gentle and final. You were never sent to find her. You were sent to become her. Lyra gasped, her body arching as light erupted from her skin. No, she cried. They said I was built from him, not that. The voice responded. You are the completion, the final form. Eli was the origin. You are the escape. You were never two. You were one. The words struck like a star collapsing. Eli stumbled forward, reaching for her as she hovered midair, her skin now translucent, bones glowing beneath like a map of constellations. They split us, Lyra whispered, to control us. They divided what was whole. That's why I always knew your name. It was mine too. It's inside me. Lyra, he said, hand brushing her cheek, I'm not losing you. I don't care if we're two halves or one soul split apart. I'm choosing you. In this life, in this body. The gate pulsed. Reintegration will destroy current forms. To stabilize the timeline, the echo must be joined. What does that mean? Eli shouted. You want to merge us into some new thing? What happens to us? No one knows. It has never been done by will. Only by collapse. Lyra trembled, tears streaking down her cheeks, silver glowing like moonlight. If we do this, she said, we may lose everything we are. You, me, memories, identity. But if we don't, he said, they'll reset it, start over. And this, he touched her chest, her cheek. This will vanish like it never existed. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. Then let's not, he said. Let's become. He stepped forward, pressed his forehead to hers. She wrapped her arms around his neck. The light swallowed them both. Their bodies dissolved not into death but into harmony. Cells shimmered. Bones cracked and reformed. Blood rewrote itself. What emerged was not Eli, not Lyra, but something new, taller, androgynous. Eyes glowing silver and blue, hair white gold flowing with solar motion. Skin alive with symbols. The voice returned, quiet now. The echo has become whole. The gate closed. The ship sealed itself, and silence returned. The being collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily, alone, confused, yet aware. It opened its eyes and whispered a name, not one, but two. We are Eli Lyra. The world had changed, but no one knew what that meant yet, not even them. Silence held the ship like a blanket too thick to breathe through. The air was still, no more alarms, no more pulses from the gate, no more voices in their heads. Only the slow, ragged breathing of something new that had never existed before now. The being, Eli Lyra, though the name no longer felt like a full description, lay curled on the deck, bathed in a soft blue light emanating from their skin, hair spread around them like spilled starlight. Their body trembled with each breath, but not from pain, from remembering. The memories didn't come in order. They came like a wave of raw sensation crashing over a shore, impossible to separate from one another. The time Lyra had looked up from the wreckage and whispered his name, the moment Eli first touched her cheek and felt the world shift beneath his feet, the first kiss, the final surrender, the desperate lovemaking before the war reached their door. And beneath all that, deeper still, was a childhood in a lab room without windows, humming softly to distract from loneliness, and knowing without being told that someone, somewhere was doing the same. The being sat up slowly. The room had changed. The ship was different now. It didn't feel like a machine anymore. It felt like a chamber inside a body, a heart that beat with them. The ship had become an extension of them, or perhaps it always was. "You're awake," said a voice from the shadows. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even surprised. The being turned. Standing at the far end of the room, no longer wearing armor, was the commander from the Union boarding party. She looked calm, hands empty, helmet gone, her dark eyes unreadable. "You didn't stop us," the being said. "You didn't try to kill us when we changed." "I was never here to stop you," she replied. "I was here to watch." "To watch what?" "To see if the pattern would hold." She walked slowly across the room, then stopped several feet away. No one believed it would. Every version before this, every echo, every reset, every trial, ended in failure. Either the host resisted, or the imprint decayed, or the merging destroyed both halves. But you did it voluntarily. "You knew," the being said, voice quiet but layered. "You knew this would happen." "Not exactly," she replied, "but we hoped, or at least I did. The Union never truly understood the gate. They thought it was a weapon, a tool. They never saw the soul inside it." The being stood. "And what now? Will you take us? Try to study what we've become?" "No," she said. "I've done my part. I was once like you, long ago. A resonance failed, a bonding lost. I swore if I ever saw it completed, truly completed, I would let it be free." The being tilted their head. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because you need to leave," she said. "The Union will come back, with science, with guns, with laws that cannot comprehend what you are now. But there are others like me, hidden across systems, watching, waiting. We are the keepers of the unwritten." The being blinked. "We thought the keepers were trying to control us." "Some are," she said, "but not all. Some of us are just trying to let life evolve without chains." She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a crystal, glowing faintly, and placed it on the floor between them. "This is a seed key. It can open paths beyond space, systems untouched, realms where even the Union cannot follow. Why give this to us?" "Because you are no longer a person," she said. "You are a concept, an event, a living proof that even engineered things can choose love." The being stepped forward and picked up the seed key. It was warm, familiar. It pulsed in sync with their own heartbeat. "What will you tell them?" they asked. "That you died," she said. "That the anomaly collapsed. That there was nothing to salvage." "They'll believe it. They always believe what they want." The being nodded once. "Thank you." The commander turned to go, then paused at the door. "One more thing," she said. "You may think you're one now, but in time the halves may separate again. Not as punishment, not as failure, but because even unity can't hold forever. You are still individuals, even in your togetherness." The being frowned. "Will we forget?" "Maybe," she said, "or maybe you'll find each other again, on some new world, under a different sky, with new names and old hearts. And then she was gone. The ship hummed quietly. The seed key vibrated. The being walked slowly back to the bridge. Systems responded to their presence. Navigation spun with possibilities. Stars they had never known opened up in curved patterns of light. "Where should we go?" they asked aloud, voice echoing back in strange harmony. No one answered, because there was no one left to command. Only them, only possibility. They set the coordinates without knowing why, choosing a destination that didn't exist on any map. Something in their chest pulled in that direction. Not fear, not duty, just hope. As the ship rose silently from the broken orbit of its origin, the beings stood at the window and watched the stars shift. Inside them, two voices stirred. Eli, Lyra. They were quiet, but not gone. Just dreaming. And far, far away, in a lab that no longer existed in official records, a new chamber lit up. A heartbeat flickered to life. A voice whispered through the ether. One word, a name. Lyra. The loop had broken. But echoes never die. There was no ceremony to their departure. No crowds, no drums, no monumental speech. The ship simply moved, slipping through the unknown like a whispered breath through silk, vanishing into a fold of light beyond the maps of any star-charted system. The entity once known as Eli and Lyra stood alone at the helm, watching the view ahead bend and blur into a tunnel of spiraling color. They had chosen to leave everything behind. The wreckage of their old selves, the broken systems that tried to control them, and the history written in someone else's ink. What they hadn't chosen, however, was what came next. First came the nausea. Not the ordinary kind. This was philosophical nausea. The kind of sick you get when you realize you might exist in more than one timeline simultaneously, and someone else might be you, having an existential crisis in a mirror you haven't looked into yet. Then came the hunger. The being blinked, or at least thought they did, because blinking now felt less like an action and more like a setting. "I need food," they muttered, "or sustenance. Or maybe fusion core salad? I don't even know what I eat anymore." The ship, now partially integrated with their thoughts, opened a storage bay near the rear chamber. Inside were rows of rations, both human and alien. They blinked again. "Okay," they said slowly. "I guess we still like chocolate. That's something." They pulled out a square foil-wrapped bar and opened it carefully. The moment the taste hit their tongue, a burst of pleasure erupted so violently in their brain that they stumbled back into the wall. "Oh, wow, that's aggressively delicious." They sat on the floor and ate in silence, letting the quiet stretch around them. But quiet doesn't last long on a ship that shares your nervous system. Suddenly, the hull groaned softly, not in pain but in discomfort. "What was that?" they asked. A section of the wall beside them retracted to reveal a small reflective panel, not quite a mirror, but enough to show their face, or what passed for it. They crawled toward it slowly, hesitant, chewing the last bit of chocolate bar. What looked back at them was both familiar and foreign. Their face was symmetrical, unnervingly so, with Eli's sharp jawline softened by Lyra's delicate cheekbones. The eyes glowed faintly in two colors at once. The ears were mostly human, but occasionally twitched like they were deciding whether or not to remember how fox ears worked. The skin shimmered faintly, not glowing like before, but pulsing gently with breath. They tilted their head and watched the movement. "Okay," they muttered. "We're hot. That's a relief. I was really hoping we didn't become some glowing androgynous blob." They stood and turned, trying to assess the rest of themselves, then sighed in mild frustration. "But we're also tall, like uncomfortably tall. I'm going to hit my head on things. I just know it." Their voice echoed a bit too loudly in the empty chamber. "Okay, note to self," they said, walking to the control panel. "Figure out what we eat, how we sleep, whether we're left or right-handed, and if we're allowed to flirt with ourselves." The console lit up, responding to their presence with a soft pulse. A message appeared. It was not from the outside. It came from within the ship, or rather the ship's personality, which now seemed to be developing a voice of its own. The words scrolled slowly. "Welcome, Eli Lyra. Shall we begin the orientation sequence for your new existence?" They blinked. "Wait, there's a tutorial." The screen replied, yes. Step 1. Emotional calibration. Oh no, they muttered. This is going to be awkward. The lights in the bridge dimmed. A projection unfolded before them, not in 2 dimensions, but in full sensory immersion. Suddenly they stood in a forest, dappled with gold light, where they saw themselves. Or rather saw Eli, just Eli, sitting by a stream, alone. The projection spoke. This is Eli before memory, isolated, angry, stubborn, purpose unformed. The image flickered. Lyra appeared, floating in a tank, arms curled around herself, her face blank. This is Lyra before choice, controlled, afraid, incomplete. The images merged, faded, shifted to show their first touch, then their kiss, then the resonance, then the intimacy on the bridge. Your merger was not simply biological, the voice said. It was emotional, spiritual, mythological, but all fusion carries legacy. Therefore, you must now choose which parts of your past to retain and which to release. The being frowned. Wait, I can delete memories? No, said the voice, but you can decide what defines you. The projection changed again. A new scene appeared. Eli's childhood room. The boy version of him sat crying over a broken toy. Then another. Lyra, trapped in a cell, sobbing as her tail was forcibly removed by cold instruments. The being winced. Enough! You must face it, said the voice. If you are to continue as Eli Lyra, you must carry both weight and freedom. The drama must be lived, not just remembered. But why? Because the universe loves stories, the voice whispered, and the best stories are the ones where even gods stumble. The projection ended. The lights returned. The being stood alone again. But something inside had shifted. They were no longer confused, just incredibly self-aware. So we're the main character of a cosmic soap opera, they said aloud. Great. They returned to the pilot's chair and slumped into it with all the grace of someone who had just experienced a full-blown identity recalibration and still hadn't brushed their teeth. The ship waited. All right, they said finally. What's step 2? A pause, then, fashion selection. What? You may now choose a new outfit to represent your new self. A drawer opened. Holograms of outfits cycled before them, some practical, some ceremonial, some incredibly uncomfortable looking. They stared in stunned silence at one particular suit that looked like it was made of solar wind and possibly regret. I have questions, they muttered, and the ship cheerfully replied, that is expected. Choosing clothes turned out to be more complicated than expected. Eli Lyra had already stood in front of the wardrobe interface for what felt like half a galactic rotation, arms crossed, their expressions somewhere between existential crisis and passive-aggressive irritation. The ship kept offering options. A regal ensemble woven from reactive energy silk that sparkled when they moved. A tight tactical suit designed to emphasize agility and definitely not leave much to the imagination. A minimalist tunic that shifted colors depending on emotional state, which sounded like a romantic disaster waiting to happen. I'm not wearing something that screams horny every time I think about kissing myself, they muttered. The ship paused, then politely removed the color-shifting option from rotation. How about this, the ship suggested, presenting a modest hybrid suit, half human pilot aesthetic, half Zarathian tribal pattern. Sleek, functional, and with enough flair to imply they were the protagonist in every scene. Fine, Eli Lyra said, grabbing it with a sigh. But if anyone calls this a hero's outfit, I'm ejecting myself into orbit. As they dressed, an alert chimed. Not from the ship's core systems, but from the outer deck. Something was approaching. Not a ship, not a signal. A life form, one, walking toward them across vacuum. No pressure suit, no pod, just strolling. That's impossible, they said. No being survives open vacuum without some kind of tech. The ship responded, this one does. You know them. The words stopped them cold. We know them. How? Not in this version, but you did once, before the loop collapsed. Eli Lyra stood still for a long moment. Then they walked toward the viewing chamber. Outside the reinforced transparency, drifting gently toward the ship's side hatch, was a man, tall, lithe, glowing faintly. His body wrapped in a fabric that didn't ripple in space but pulsed with internal heat. His face was smooth, ageless, and his eyes were gold like superheated metal. And the moment Eli Lyra saw him, they gasped. Because recognition didn't come from logic. It came from the ache behind their eyes. "He's beautiful," they said softly. "And he used to love you," the ship whispered. "Before you were divided. He remembered you long after you forgot him. He's been waiting." "Waiting where?" "On the other side of the gate." The airlock cycled open. The man stepped inside without hesitation, exhaling softly as gravity resumed its grip. He stood, brushed non-existent dust from his sleeves, and then walked toward the inner door like he belonged there. The door slid open, and there they were, face to face. Eli Lyra swallowed. "Do I know you?" "Not anymore," the man said, voice smooth and low. "But I remember every version of you. I'm called Kale. What are you doing here?" "You summoned me," Kale said simply. "Not with your mouth, with your mind. When you merged, the gate screamed across dimensions. I followed it." "Why?" "Because I was your first choice." The silence after that was so thick it hurt. Eli Lyra blinked. "Excuse me?" "Before Lyra. Before Eli. Before the split and the cycle and the reset. There was only one version, one being. And I loved them. I loved you. You told me to wait. You said you'd come back. So I waited." "How long?" "Time doesn't pass the same near the gate," Kale said, voice tight. "But I watched stars die and reform. I watched galaxies burn. I watched every failed cycle you were forced through. I stayed alive for this." Eli Lyra stepped back. "That can't be true." "Search your resonance," Kale whispered. "Feel it. I'm still in there. The memory of our hands, the sound you made when I kissed your shoulder, the way your skin tasted like sunrise." They gasped, because it was there, buried deep, a kiss under golden light, a body pressed to theirs, a promise never to forget, a laugh, a sigh. "Why didn't I remember?" "Because it hurt too much," Kale said. "You chose to let go, but I never did." Eli Lyra's breath hitched. "I'm not the same person now." "I know," Kale said, "and I don't expect you to love me again. I came to say goodbye. Or hello, whichever this is." "That's incredibly unfair," they muttered. "You show up looking like a god, say romantic things I half remember, and then offer me a cosmic maybe?" "Drama suits you," Kale said with a small smile. "It always did." "I'm already confused about who I am, what I am, and whether or not my ears should twitch when someone flirts with me," they replied. "This is not helping." "Would it help," Kale said, stepping closer, "if I said you're still the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen?" Eli Lyra flushed, which was impressive considering they glowed. "Don't make me blush in both genders," they said. "It's disorienting." Kale laughed. "You always did hate compliments." "I'm not used to earning them yet." Kale reached out slowly and touched their wrist. The moment of contact was warm, safe, familiar. Eli Lyra closed their eyes, and suddenly they were elsewhere. A memory not just recalled but lived. A field of blue grass, a tent, a soft bed, Kale's voice whispering into their neck. Laughter. Hands, heat. "That was real," they said when they opened their eyes. "We were real." "We still are," Kale said. "But now it's your choice." "Choice," Eli Lyra echoed. "Everything always comes back to that." "Because freedom is the only thing the gate can't control," Kale replied. "And love is the only reason to keep trying." They looked at him, then down at his hand, then back at the ship. "I don't know what to do," they said honestly. "That's the point," Kale said. "You finally get to decide." Eli Lyra stepped away, uncertain. "Give me time." "You've earned all the time in the universe," he said and bowed slightly, then turned and walked out, vanishing down the corridor like he had never arrived. The ship was silent. They were alone again. Sort of. The past had just walked into the room, kissed their memories, and left them emotionally short-circuiting. "Great," they said to the empty room. "Now I've got feelings, and cheekbones, and no clue what comes next." There were many things the ship could do, but preventing awkward emotional aftershocks wasn't one of them. Eli Lyra wandered aimlessly through the central corridor, trying to pretend they weren't spiraling into full-blown identity anxiety. One second they were a merged cosmic being with power and clarity. The next they were considering if their voice should sound more sultry or serious, depending on whether Kale walked back in unexpectedly. They passed a reflective surface and paused. Okay, they muttered. Let's get this straight. You've survived temporal resets, bonded with a genetically spliced warrior princess version of yourself, fought off intergalactic assassins, and merged with a ship. You can handle being flirted with by a man who may or may not have kissed your shoulder in another timeline. Their reflection raised an eyebrow. It was a very judgmental eyebrow. Fine, they added. Maybe I'm not built for decisions. Maybe I'm a walking contradiction wearing sexy pants and high-functioning trauma. Just as they were about to mentally spiral again, the ship's alarm chirped softly, then again with more urgency. What now? They groaned. A screen flared to life. Incoming object. Fast, unscheduled, uninvited. The being rushed to the helm and stared at the data. Oh no! A Union diplomatic cruiser was approaching. Of all the things that could have arrived, this was by far the most inconvenient. Diplomats, Eli Lyra had learned, were basically assassins wearing formal vests. Why are they here? They asked aloud. The ship answered with the digital equivalent of a sigh. They detected the gate's resonance flare. They believe you are an illegal experiment that must be deconstructed and studied. They're not entirely wrong, they muttered, but also incredibly rude. Should I initiate cloaking? The ship asked. Or fake an explosion? Do we have a pretend to be dead button? That's technically the emergency nap protocol. Save that for later. They sat, fingers steepled, and thought. The diplomatic ship docked without permission. A shuttle launched from its belly, sleek and blindingly white, like it was compensating for something. And standing inside the bay as the shuttle doors opened was a woman, human, mostly. In the way a venomous flower is technically a plant. She wore a perfect suit, hair sculpted into a wave so precise it might have been laser trimmed. Her heels clicked with the authority of someone who knew diplomacy was just battle with smaller explosions. Eli Lyra, she said, we meet at last. Do I know you? They asked, though they already disliked her voice. Director Vell, she replied, Union Biostructure Ethics and Recovery Division. I'm here to stabilize you. Stabilize? Yes, she said smoothly. Your emotional patterns are unpredictable. Your recent fusion appears to have corrupted your logic centers. That's called being alive, they snapped, and sarcastic. Which is precisely why I'm here, she replied, pulling out a glowing neural brace. With this, we can dampen the personality overload and return you to baseline function. You mean erase my feelings? I prefer the term optimize. Do I look like I need optimization? They stood tall, radiant, glowing with light and contradiction. You're barefoot and eating from a chocolate pout, she noted dryly. I'm in crisis, they shouted. It's called coping. You are a danger to yourself and others. I am the only self I've got, they replied, and I've only hurt people with my charisma and poor decision-making. That's not dangerous. That's relatable, she stepped forward. We don't want to hurt you. Then don't, they said softly. Let me be what I am. Let me figure this out. I can't do that, she said. You're property of Union Biodevelopment. You're classified as a Class A cognitive anomaly with emotional deviation patterns beyond protocol. You're the anomaly, they whispered, still thinking you can catalog a soul. They didn't move, but the ship did. The chamber shifted. The lights pulsed. Doors locked. The floor beneath the diplomat's feet tilted ever so slightly. You are not authorized, the ship said. Leave now. You're helping them? She snapped. That vessel is no longer hardware, Eli Lyra said. It's bonded to me. It protects me. And if you touch me again with that glowing brain zapper, it will eject you into space so fast your ethics will scatter across 6 dimensions. I represent the Union, she growled. I represent me, they replied. And I'm tired of being told what I am. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. Unlikely, they said. I have too much personality for regret. She was escorted out by 2 robotic arms that hummed softly as they carried her back to her shuttle. The doors sealed. The ship shifted again. Eli Lyra slumped into the pilot's chair and groaned. This is my life now, they muttered. Interdimensional romance, sentient architecture, and aggressive bureaucrats with perfect hair. A pause, then a ping. Message incoming. This time it wasn't from the Union. It was a personal channel. Kale. I left something for you in the med bay, his voice said. I didn't think you'd want to talk, but I had to give you this. Curious and exhausted, they made their way to the med bay. Inside, on the exam table, was a single object, a pendant shaped like a spiral. Inside it, light, not just light, a memory. They touched it. A voice filled the room. Not Kale's, theirs, but younger. If I ever forget who I am, it said, remind me that I am made of choice, that I said yes, even when I was afraid, that I laughed even when I broke, that I kissed someone and meant it. Eli Lyra sat down beside it and cried. But it wasn't a tragic cry. It was awkward. It was loud. It included sniffling and a hiccup. And somewhere in the middle of it, they laughed. Because the universe had just thrown them into a plotline that not even the gate could write fully. And somehow, despite everything, they were still standing, still choosing, still here. The pendant sat in their hand like a seed of light, pulsing slowly, warm to the touch but not in temperature. Warm like the last heartbeat of a home you've only ever dreamed of. Eli Lyra turned it over again and again, fingers gentle, reluctant to let it go even for a second. The message had ended, but the echo lingered in their head, in their chest, in their bones. The words had been simple, honest, not dressed in cosmic grandeur or cloaked in metaphor. It had just been them, a voice that sounded like a version of themselves they almost didn't recognize anymore. Vulnerable, human. If I ever forget who I am, remind me. Those words weren't a command. They were a promise. And in that room filled with sterile light and humming panels, surrounded by technology more advanced than most civilizations would ever understand, it was the only thing that felt real. They stayed seated for a long time, not frozen, just still, processing, integrating, not data, but meaning. Emotions didn't arrive neatly in categories for them anymore. Sadness could walk in hand with gratitude, and joy might be the twin of regret. Everything was layered, merged, reborn. They could have stayed in that moment for hours, even days. And maybe they did, because time had become a suggestion more than a rule. But the universe never lets peace sit too long. Not in stories, not in truth. A soft chime broke the stillness, followed by a calm pulse in the floor. The ship was speaking to them, not with urgency, with invitation. We've arrived, the ship said. At where? They asked without standing. A place that never had a name, the ship replied. One of the coordinates you marked. Long ago, before memory reset. They stood slowly, the pendant still wrapped in their fingers, and walked toward the helm. The screen showed nothing at first, just blackness. But then, like eyes adjusting in the dark, a faint shimmer revealed itself. It wasn't a planet, it wasn't a star, it was a structure, floating, silent, ancient, huge beyond comprehension, yet gentle in its presence. It was shaped like a spiral, endless in its loops, and as their ship approached, it reacted. Light stirred across its surface like waves chasing each other. What is that? They whispered. A library, the ship answered, or a cathedral, or a seed bank. Maybe all three. It's what's left when knowledge stops being owned. And why are we here? Because this is the final resonance, the ship said. The place where the gate first whispered your name. That stopped them cold. My name? Not Eli, not Lyra, not Kale, not even Echo. The one that came before all of them. The name only existence remembers. The ship docked gently, barely a nudge. The doors opened to a hallway of light that curved without edges, as if space itself had decided to relax for once. Eli Lyra stepped out. They walked with no plan, no map, just instinct. The interior of the structure didn't have rooms or doors. It had moments, snapshots of time suspended in clarity, memories not just of individuals, but of civilizations. Songs made from color, prayers sung by species with no mouths, love letters etched into gravity fields, pain recorded in harmonic pulses that made you weep without knowing why. And at the center of it all, they found a chamber, empty but expectant. The ceiling opened to a view not of stars, but of every version of them that had ever existed. Floating, watching, not judging, just witnessing. Eli alone in the snow. Lyra bleeding in the tank. Kale crying into his hands. Eli, Lyra, trembling after their first kiss. The merged form reaching for answers. And the voice. That first voice. Not the gate, not the ship. The first voice. The one that whispered their name into the fabric of reality before they had a body to hold it. You are the sum of what was never meant to be, it said, and yet you are. They stepped forward. Why me? Because you remembered, the voice said. Because you chose to feel when it hurt. Because you loved what you didn't understand. And because you kept going. What now? That depends, the voice said. Do you want an ending? They hesitated. It was tempting. To rest. To let the story close with grace. But as they stood there surrounded by fragments of their many selves, another question stirred. What if I don't? The voice was quiet, not in disapproval, but in understanding. Then you will become something else, a story not yet written, a possibility that refuses to die. Will I be alone? Only if you choose to be. They looked at the memories, at the pain, at the joy, at every time they had failed and loved and tried again. I think I want to live, they said, not as a function, not as a symbol, just as me. Then live, said the voice, but take this with you. The air shimmered. From it came a small sphere, pure light. It hovered in their palm. What is it? Your name, the voice said. The first one, before the world tried to define you. They looked into the light and smiled. It felt like laughter, like the first breath, like the moment between a kiss and a promise. Thank you, they whispered. You're welcome, said the voice, and the chamber dimmed. The memory closed. They walked back to the ship holding the sphere and the pendant, both glowing softly, neither heavy in weight, but both heavy in meaning. The ship lit up as they stepped aboard. You're different, it said. A little, they admitted. Did you find what you were looking for? I think I found what I forgot I needed. Where to next? The ship asked. Home, they said. Or somewhere we can make one. Coordinates? Anywhere with sky, they replied. And time. The ship lifted from the structure gently. No fanfare, no fireworks, just quiet motion, like a breath finally exhaled. Behind them, the spiral structure faded into the dark, but not gone, never gone, just resting, waiting for another soul who needed to remember. They sat in the pilot's chair, light pooling around them, fingers brushing the controls. And for the first time in all their scattered, rewritten, fractal existence, they smiled not as Eli or Lyra or even Echo, or they smiled as themselves, whole, healing, homeward bound. The journey toward what they called home had no defined path, no straight line drawn across the void, only a feeling in their chests that tightened and softened in rhythm with the stars beyond the viewport. Eli Lyra no longer measured time in hours or cycles, but in heartbeats of stillness, of laughter that came unexpectedly, and of small moments when silence felt like safety rather than emptiness. They had not yet decided what kind of world they wanted to build. That was the freedom they had earned, not through violence or conquest, but through remembering. Remembering how to be more than a weapon, more than a project, more than someone else's purpose. The ship, too, seemed to settle into this new rhythm. It no longer called them captain or user. It simply addressed them as Eli Lyra, with a softness that bordered on affection. The vessel, once rigid in its design, had adapted in shape and tone, forming windows where there had been none, curving hallways to feel more organic, and creating quiet corners with pillows and books, and little places where one could exist without expectation. One morning, if it could be called that in deep space, they woke to the soft vibration of music, not played, but remembered. Lyra's voice hummed from within, not as a recording, but as a memory surfacing naturally, and for once they didn't flinch at it. They let it echo through them like waves lapping against a long-abandoned shore. Their steps took them to the greenhouse, which the ship had lovingly constructed from the biological records they recovered in their travels. It was an impossible place, where Zerathian moon fruits glowed beside Terran ivy, and small biolantern beetles flew lazily around stalks of bioluminescent corn. They knelt by a patch of purple moss and let it breathe beneath their fingertips. It pulsed slowly, as if glad for their presence. I don't know what I'm doing, they whispered aloud, but maybe that's all right. It is, the ship replied. Existence is not a solved equation. You're meant to evolve, not complete. Is that why you changed? Because you did first, it said. You taught me to adapt. They leaned back and stared upward through the transparent dome. Beyond it stretched the glittering dark, speckled with endless unknowns. For the first time in all the timelines, all the echoes, all the cycles that had tried to erase them, they felt no need to run, just to be. The days passed, or maybe they didn't, but it felt like they did. And in that stretch of peace, they began building, not with tools or blueprints, but with gestures. A room for art, which they filled with paintings that shifted depending on who looked at them. A chamber for sound, where memories could be replayed not with words but through scents and warmth and textures that felt like hugging your favorite song. They wrote stories into the walls. They gave names to the stars that had never been claimed. They planted trees that would never bear fruit but gave shade in dreams. And in one quiet corner of the ship, they built a small alcove. Inside it, a memory seed rested. The one Kale had left them. They hadn't reached for it since that day. Not out of rejection, but reverence. It was part of their story, yes, but not the whole of it. Not anymore. They weren't stuck between past and present now. They were the bridge. Sometimes they would still talk aloud, even when alone. Would Lyra have liked this? They asked once, while hanging strips of wind chimes above the ventilation shafts. The ship answered, she liked beauty that moved. You are continuing her instinct. Another day as they watched a projection of a sea that never existed but felt real enough to make their chest ache, they wondered aloud, was Eli always so afraid of softness? The ship replied gently, only because he thought softness would be used against him. He didn't know softness could be strength. I wish I could tell them both, they said. Tell them it's okay now. They know, the ship replied. You carry them. I carry so many, Eli Lyra murmured. All the echoes. All the pieces. Then make them a garden, the ship said, so they can grow in peace. So they did. A place at the center of the ship, circular and alive, with a tree that held petals made of memories, and each branch bore a name. Eli, Lyra, Kale, Mira, Echo, Sora, Zara. Versions of themselves that lived once, or maybe only ever in fragments, but mattered. They lit candles that never went out. They carved benches where future selves might sit. They played music they didn't remember composing, but somehow knew every note. And one day, without fanfare, someone knocked. It wasn't metaphorical, it was a physical knock. A soft tapping against the outer hull of the ship as it drifted through a region of space they thought was uninhabited. They stared at the monitor in disbelief. Did someone just knock? Yes, the ship confirmed, and they appeared to be holding flowers. Why are they holding flowers in space? Unclear. Shall I let them in? Is this a prank? You did tell the universe you were ready to meet others, the ship said with the digital equivalent of a shrug. Perhaps it listened. The hatch opened. A figure floated in, wrapped in layers of woven light fiber, with a hat made entirely of star pollen and a smile so wide it had to be deliberate. Hi, the stranger said. Sorry to interrupt, but are you the one they call Storyborn? Eli Lyra blinked. Maybe? Perfect, the stranger said. I brought you weird fruit and possibly contagious wisdom. Do you have tea? What is happening? You're a legend, the stranger said. Or a rumor, or both. Either way, I figured I'd find out. Also, your tree sent me. The what? That glowing spiral thing? It talks. In riddles, mostly. Told me to find the one who sang with scars. That's the worst poem I've ever heard, Eli Lyra muttered. Great. You're sarcastic. You are the one. The stranger took off their hat and shook out glittering dust that promptly turned into floating fish. So, tea? And somehow, despite the complete nonsense of the moment, Eli Lyra smiled. Yeah, they said. I think I can make tea. They walked together into the lounge. The ship adjusted itself, creating cushions and light. The stranger sat, eyes wide, taking in the surroundings. This place is magic, they said. No, Eli Lyra replied. It's home. Same thing. They laughed. Because maybe it was. The tea was made from leaves that technically didn't exist, brewed in water that had never touched a planet, and poured into cups shaped by memory rather than ceramic. It tasted like nothing and everything all at once. Sweet where it should have been bitter, warm where it should have burned, and soothing in a way that made Eli Lyra's chest ache in quiet gratitude. The stranger who arrived with pollen in their hair and fish that floated mid-air now lounged across from them as if they had always belonged there, telling stories that may or may not have been true. Tales of planets shaped like bells, where laughter kept the atmosphere stable, or suns that only shone for those who sang in tune. At first, Eli Lyra tried to keep up, to categorize, to decipher whether these were metaphors or metaphysics. But then they realized it didn't matter. The truth in stories was never in the structure, but in the feeling. And the feeling was joy. They had forgotten what that felt like without guilt attached. Eventually, the stranger stood and stretched. "I should go," they said. "There are places that haven't heard my terrible singing yet." "You could stay," Eli Lyra offered, surprising even themselves. "I could," the stranger smiled. "But some of us are meant to wander so others remember to stay. Still, I think you'll see me again. Maybe not in this form." They walked to the hatch. Before leaving, they paused and looked back. "You really did become a story," the stranger said, "but not the kind others tell, the kind they remember in their bones." Then they were gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of starlight and the smallest echo of a chuckle. Alone again, but not lonely, Eli Lyra stood in the quiet of the ship, surrounded by softness, by life, by things they had built with their own hands and heart. They wandered to the center garden, where the tree still pulsed with gentle light. Petals shimmered like tiny lanterns, swaying though no wind blew. "It's strange," they said aloud, not needing an audience. How much of the journey was just learning not to run? The ship responded, not with words but with a faint hum, like agreement wrapped in song. They touched the trunk of the tree, letting their fingers drift across the names etched into it. Each one a version, a life, a choice. Then beneath them all, they carved one last name. Just one. Their own, not a combination, not a symbol, just a name. One they had not spoken aloud yet, one that had been given in silence by the spiral memory, one that belonged not to a past version or a future echo, but to this moment, this person. They whispered it softly, and the tree bloomed in response. For the first time, petals broke free from the branches and floated upward like stars being born in slow motion. One by one, they filled the chamber with gentle light until it seemed the whole ship had turned into a nebula of memory and hope. They stood still, letting it wash over them. Then slowly they turned and walked to the helm. "Ship," they said, "I think I'm ready. To travel? To live." The interface shimmered. "Where to?" "Somewhere where my name is just a name," they replied. "Not a legend, not a file, not a prayer or a threat. Just mine." The ship thrummed in agreement. "Coordinates open." They input nothing, just a direction. Forward. The stars outside began to shift. Space itself curled slightly, reacting to the new course. As they watched, the past didn't vanish. It just stepped aside respectfully. In the viewport ahead, a star was being born. Not metaphorically, a real star. A new light in the universe. And as they stared at it, their lips curved into a smile. Not the smile of triumph. Not of survival, but of recognition. That out there, past everything they had known, was the next part of their story. And that they didn't need to know it yet. Because for the first time in forever, the ending wasn't the end. It was a door. And they had the key. The ship soared into the starlight. No audience, no applause. Just silence. The kind that makes space sacred. The kind that tells you a story has done what it was meant to do. Then just before the glow of the new star filled the screen completely, Eli Lyra laughed softly and whispered a name into the universe. Their name. And it was beautiful.